Hey everyone, I'm Riley and I'm a research assistant for Hero Not Zero, which basically means I read way too many documents so you don't have to. We dig into issues that sound simple on the surface, but once you start pulling the thread, things get complicated. Zoe and Cody decided to let me try making research videos, so we're starting today with what we're calling an easy topic just to practice. I'm covering Illinois' recently passed Clean Slate Law, sponsored by Illinois Senator L.G. Sims Jr. and signed into law last month by Governor J.B. Pritzker. Thanks for joining me tonight. Let's walk through this together. In Illinois, there's now a new law in the books that promises a second chance for millions. But it also brings up some really big questions about justice, public safety, and what it even means to wipe a record clean in our digital world. So today we are breaking down the Illinois Clean Slate Act, which is a massive, massive shift in how the state thinks about criminal justice. To really get why this matters, you just have to look at this one number, 3 million. That's how many adults in Illinois are walking around with a past arrest or conviction on their record. That's a mark that can follow them, for the rest of their lives. And that mark, it comes with an absolutely massive price tag. State estimates show that those records cost Illinoisans $4.7 billion in lost wages every single year. I mean, that's money that is not going back into families, it's not going into local businesses, and it's not boosting the state's economy. So we want to break this down. First, we'll look at the second chance gap, the big problem that made this law necessary in the first place. Then we'll dive into the specifics of this new automated system, what it does, and just as importantly, who gets to benefit. We'll also zoom out and look at the national movement, weigh the pros and cons, and finally ask a really tough question for our modern age. Can a record ever be truly erased? So, before this new act, Illinois technically had a way for people to seal their records, but here's the thing. It was fundamentally broken. It was a system that promised a second chance that it almost never delivered, basically turning past mistakes into a permanent punishment. Get a load of these numbers. You had more than 2 million people in the state who were eligible to have their records sealed, but fewer than 6,000 of them actually managed to do it each year. That's a success rate of less than 1%. This huge chasm between who could get help and who actually did, that's what everyone started calling the second chance gap. So why was that gap so huge? Well, the old system was a total bureaucratic nightmare. It was completely manual. You had to file a petition, you probably had to hire a lawyer, pay a bunch of fees, show up in court. And to make it worse, the process was different in all 102 counties. It created this confusing and expensive maze that most people just couldn't navigate. And that brings us to the solution passed by the legislature. The Clean Slate Act was specifically designed to close that second chance gap by just completely overhauling the whole process. The real game changer here is one single idea: automation. It completely flips the script. The burden is no longer on the individual to figure it all out. Instead, the state is now responsible for automatically finding and sealing eligible records. For the people who qualify, that means no petition, no lawyer, and no court fees. It just happens. Now, it's really crucial to understand what sealing actually means, because it's not the same as expungement. Expungement literally destroys a record. Sealing, on the other hand, just hides it from most public background checks, like for jobs or apartments. But, and this is key, certain groups like law enforcement, prosecutors, and even some employers like public school districts, they can still see these sealed records. They're often referred to as expunged, but really people mean sealed. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. Because while this law is really broad, it's not a free-for-all. Lawmakers still drew some pretty clear lines around who this helps and, just as importantly, who it doesn't. So for those who are eligible, the new process is pretty straightforward. First, you have to completely finish your sentence. That includes any parole or probation. Then a waiting period starts. It's 2 years for misdemeanors and 3 years for most of the eligible felonies. During that waiting period, you still have to remain crime-free. If you check all those boxes, the state automatically kicks off the sealing process. Understanding the exceptions here is absolutely key. The law explicitly excludes a list of serious offenses from getting sealed automatically. We're talking about DUIs, domestic batteries, sex offenses, and the most serious felonies like homicide and robbery. Those records are going to stay public. And just a heads up, this isn't going to happen overnight. After the bill was signed, the Illinois police had to start rebuilding this massive new record system from the ground up. Now, this whole automated sealing process is officially scheduled to go live at the beginning of 2029. So while this is obviously a huge deal for Illinois, the state is actually a part of a much bigger bipartisan trend. All across the country, states are starting to rethink the idea of a criminal record being a lifelong sentence. Here's a snapshot of how different states are tackling this. You've got Pennsylvania, which was a pioneer, but they took a pretty cautious approach. They only automatically seal misdemeanors and only after a 10-year wait. Then you have California, which went big with one of the most expansive laws covering most felonies after just 4 years. And Illinois seems to have landed somewhere in the middle. It's a comprehensive system for most nonviolent felonies with a 3-year waiting period, really trying to find that balance between reform and caution. You know, a law this big was always going to spark a pretty intense debate. So let's take a look at the arguments from both supporters and critics about what the real-world impact is going to be. So the main argument from supporters, including the governor, is that this is fundamentally a public safety bill, and the logic is pretty simple. Having a criminal record is a huge barrier to getting a stable job and a place to live. If you remove that barrier, people are far less likely to reoffend. And that, in theory, makes communities safer for everyone. And then there's the economic argument, which is just as powerful. Research shows that when someone gets their record sealed, their wages jump by an average of 22% in the first year alone. For the whole state of Illinois, that could mean a $4.7 billion boost to the economy. That's huge. But critics have raised a really significant concern, and it's about plea bargains. They worry that someone could be arrested for a serious violent crime, but then they plead guilty to a lesser offense, one that is eligible for sealing. In that case, an employer doing a background check would never know about the more serious original charge. And clean background checks in general can lead us astray to believe that someone is completely safe. And that brings us to our final and maybe our most complex question that we will ask in this video. Is this really a good idea for safety? Should records ever be cleared? So even when the state officially seals a record, what does it really mean in an age where information basically lives forever online? This has created this brand new problem that people are calling zombie data. Here's how it works. Private data brokers copy public court records and then they sell them. So even after the official state record is sealed, these old outdated copies can just keep floating around in private databases for years, being shared, still blocking people from getting jobs or housing. This whole reality has led to a brand new concept, social expungement. The idea is that for a clean slate to truly be clean, it can't just be a legal fix. We also have to talk about the digital footprint. Old news articles, mugshots, archived court records, all of it searchable, all of it persistent. Because here's the reality. A sealed record doesn't erase the internet. But at Hero Not Zero, this is where we draw an important line. There's a growing push for what some call social expungement. The idea that not only records should be sealed legally, but reporting, archives, and publicly available information should disappear as well. That's where things get complicated. Truthful reporting is protected by the First Amendment. Public court proceedings are public for a reason. And as we explored in our first podcast episode, access to information can matter deeply for personal safety, especially in an era of online dating and digital interactions. People use background checks not out of cruelty, but caution. If clean slate laws begin to erase not just records, but history, we risk creating blind spots. A system that makes it harder to identify repeat scammers or predators doesn't protect the vulnerable. It may expose them. Sealing a record is one thing, rewriting public truth is another. The Illinois Clean Slate Act is a bold attempt to give millions of people a second chance. It aims to boost economic mobility and reduce recidivism. Those are serious goals, but it also forces us to confront a harder question. In a world of permanent digital archives, should a clean slate mean legal relief or historical erasure? Perhaps these laws are helpful in some ways, but are we also asking where they may create unintended risks? A second chance should not come at the cost of transparency, and reform should not quietly weaken constitutional protections. This conversation isn't over. In a future episode, we'll explore the First Amendment implications more deeply and ask where the line between mercy and memory should really be drawn.